In a previous video, this one here, I spoke about this famous fragment containing Psalm 22:17 that was found in one of the caves at Nachal Hever near the Dead Sea. In the present video, I'd like to reiterate some of what I said previously, but also go into a little bit more detail about how the scribe who copied this manuscript wrote his yods and his vavs. The fragment that we're talking about here is remarkable for two reasons. First, because the first word in the third colon of this verse has a vav instead of a yod as its final letter. Second, because this word also has an aleph as its second letter. In my earlier video, I explained that the aleph here can be most naturally interpreted as a mater lectionis, in other words, as a vowel indicator. It indicates that a long A vowel is to be pronounced after the kaf. And so you'd read it like this, Karu. Kaf aleph resh vav is basically an alternative spelling for kaf resh vav, a verb that we could translate as they dug. You'd pronounce both spellings of the word in the same way, Karu. I also addressed the issue of whether the scribe who copied this manuscript intended for us to read a yod here, even though it extends farther down than we might expect for a yod. It's true that in other manuscripts we sometimes find yods written to look like vavs. Look at this manuscript, for example. This was not a universal writing style, however. Many scribes, probably most of them, carefully distinguish their yods from their vavs. And this makes sense. They are two distinct letters, after all. So sometimes they would write their yods to look sort of like an upside-down V. You can see that in this manuscript. This is from 1QSA, or 1Q28A, otherwise known as the Rule of the Congregation. It's quite easy to differentiate the yods from the vavs here. And another way that scribes could distinguish their yods from their vavs would be to make their yods not come down as far as their vavs. I argued that this is precisely the technique that we see in the manuscript from Nachal Hever. Here's a clip from that video where I discuss this issue. Let's look at the manuscript from Nachal Hever and see what sort of handwriting we're dealing with. It's quite clear that, at least in this manuscript, the scribe did not write his yods like the scribes did in those other manuscripts. His yods are noticeably shorter than his vavs. Look here at the verb hikifuni. Here's a yod, here's a final yod, and here's a vav. I'm making a special point here to note that this is a final yod because I've heard someone trying to argue that the final letter on karu is actually a yod. It just extends further down than usual because it's a final yod. Look though, this is a final yod, and it's clearly not as long as the final letter on karu. Here's another example. Look at this phrase. Yabitu yiru vi. They gawked. They looked upon me. Here's a yod, and here's a vav. The scribe clearly differentiated between the two letters. And then with yiru vi, here's a yod, a vav, and a final yod, which looks just like this yod. And here, I think, is a really illustrative example. This is verse 16. Mal kochai, my jaws, followed by vela'afar mawet, and to the dust of death. Notice first the vav in mal kochai, and the final yod on the same word, which is then followed by a vav. The final yod doesn't come down as far as the vav. So it's methodologically flawed, I think, to compare this manuscript with others where the yods are often indistinguishable from vavs. We need to bear in mind that scribes often had different writing styles, so what might be true of one manuscript might not be true of another. At least in this manuscript from Nachal Hever, the scribe wrote his yods and vavs in ways that allowed the reader to distinguish between them. Now, we've been looking specifically at fragment 6 of a larger manuscript known as 5/6 Hever 1B891. Not an especially catchy title, I have to say. What you're seeing on the screen is a color and an infrared photograph. It's great that we have these two kinds of photos. You can see how both can help us to read the original writing better. Oh, I should clarify here that although this fragment is referred to as Fragment 6 in the Leon Levy Digital Collection, it's referred to as Fragment 9 in the Discoveries in the Judean Desert volumes. It's all very confusing. Anyway, in this particular fragment, the yods have been clearly distinguished from the vavs. I think I've already made my case about that, but if we really want to appreciate this scribe's writing style, we should probably take into consideration more than just this one fragment. We should also look at some of the other fragments from this manuscript. That's what I would like to do in this video. It's going to require that we get down into the weeds, get a bit nerdy about stuff. So if that sounds too painful for you, feel free to watch something else. But if you're as interested in really trying to study this manuscript as I am, I think you'll definitely find this video worth your time. Okay, so let's get started. What I've done in this slide is put yellow boxes around all the yods and red boxes around all the vavs. All the boxes are exactly the same size. I've also tried to draw some lines at the base of the letters to give some way of comparing how far down each yod or vav extends in relation to some of its surrounding letters or words. So look here at this word, kadosh. The vav extends to basically the same line as the base of the shin and the dalet on either side of it. Now look here at this word, yoshev. A yod is located right next to a vav, just as we saw in fragment 6. The order is reversed here, of course, but the scribe has similarly distinguished the letters by not dropping the yod down as far as the vav. We have another fairly close juxtaposing of a vav and a yod right here, since the word tehilot is immediately followed by the word Yisrael. Now, this example illustrates how this issue can sometimes get a bit complicated. If you compare this vav with this yod, it's clear that the vav is longer. But if you compare the yod with the sin or the resh to its left, you might mistake this yod for a vav. That's not because the scribe thought that yods could just as well be written like vavs. Rather, it's because he wasn't always very consistent in how large or small he wrote his letters. Look how much shorter this sin is compared to this shin. Or compare this resh with this dalet in kadosh. So I think the yod here should be compared with the letters on this line rather than this one. Okay, now look at these words. Batchu avotenu. The two vavs definitely come down farther than the yod. And then moving back over to the right side of the column, this word, batchu, which is actually the same word that we just looked at, once again illustrates how this scribe's sizing wasn't always consistent. If we compare the size of this vav with the bet, tet, tav, or pei, it'll appear slightly raised. But if we compare it to the het on its right, it'll appear sufficiently long. The yod here on alekha is obviously raised, but this scribe writes his lameds up higher than the other letters. So to appreciate how high the yod is raised, we really need to compare the yod not with the base of the lamed, but with the base of the aleph, or the kaf. The remaining vavs on this line all extend down as far as the other letters. And it's worth noting that when a vav is written next to a vav, the two letters are indistinguishable. We can see that again right here. The same cannot be said about a vav when it's written next to a yod, as we just saw in this example, or as we can see here in the third line. A similar distinction can also be noticed when there is only one letter separating a vav from a yod. See here, here, and here. It's true that the differences between a yod and a vav are sometimes pretty slight, and there are a few places where there's no obvious distinction at all. Part of the problem is that at this scale of writing, a scribe would have needed to be very precise. It's therefore quite a testament to the scribe's abilities that we can virtually always distinguish his yods from his vavs. Even when the two letters may, at first glance, seem indistinguishable, we can almost always recognize a distinction if we look a little closer. Consider this word, for example, yaligu, which is followed by li. The yod comes down as far as both the vav and the lamed, but remember that this scribe tends to elevate his lameds. So we probably need to assume that he was imagining the base of these letters as being here rather than here. Also, just in terms of its physical size, you can see from these two boxes that the vav is significantly longer than the yod. Similarly, with yaftiru, the scribe seems to be writing on two different lines. So these two yods seem to be written on this line, whereas the vav seems to be written on a slightly higher line, along with this resh. The following bet is written on an even higher line. This is because the scribe was raising his letters progressively higher on the left side of this manuscript. We can see that in the two lines above this one as well. This is presumably because the scribe was writing without any guidelines, and if you've ever tried to write without any guidelines, you know how easy it is to start writing a bit crooked. All right, here's another fragment from the same document that we're considering. This fragment is perhaps not as illustrative as the last one, because the lines are all sloping slightly upward as we progress to the left. Also, there are lots of yods, but not as many vavs for us to compare them with. The vav here, in bin ot, is sufficiently long, at least if we compare it to the aleph and the tav right next to it, and not to the bet and nun at the beginning of the word. The yods on yarbitzeni don't extend down as far as the earlier vav or the other letters next to them. On the next line, however, the situation seems a bit more ambiguous. The yods in yancheni, especially the first one, seems very hard to distinguish from a vav. Some of the other yods are also quite long, although I think a reader would have easily recognized them as yods, since they're immediately preceded by a letter that extends out to the left, kind of like it's encroaching on its personal space. Notice that in these situations, the yod always stops short of connecting with that tail of the previous letter. You can see that here, here, and here. The situation is much different when the letter with the tail is followed by a vav. We'll see some examples of that in just a minute. And then lastly, there's no mistaking that this letter is a vav. Okay, and I'll just quickly make a few points about fragment 2. This one's difficult to analyze because many of the lines are sloping down, and many of the letters are further tilted to the left, making it difficult or impossible to draw lines to indicate the floor where each letter is supposed to terminate. That said, I still think it's clear that the scribe was making a conscious effort to differentiate his yods from vavs. The yods in this fragment don't typically come down as far as the other letters. Just look at these examples. Padita oti. Now, a lot of the stuff in this manuscript is probably easier to read in the color photo, so let's switch over to that for a second. Look, here's a yod, a vav, and a yod. Again, in the next line down, we've got a vav and a yod. It's very easy to tell which one is which just based on the size of each letter. Of course, we don't want to interpret every letter simply by its size, because that can be misleading. After all, this scribe's writing style wasn't always consistent, at least in terms of how big or little he wrote his letters. And this wasn't just the case with his vavs and yods, but with all the other letters as well. Thankfully, he gives us other clues for distinguishing between yods and vavs. For example, as we saw in the last fragment, whenever a yod is preceded by a letter with a tail, the yod terminates above that tail. See, for example, here, 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 and here. By contrast, when a vav is preceded by a letter with a tail, or by a letter that extends a little too far into its space, the letters connect. See this here on totsieni, and the vav here on ot. It also happens here on tamnu, and here on beyagon. That one's probably easier to see here in the color photo. We can also get a good clue about which letter we're dealing with whenever a yod and a vav are written side by side, or in close proximity to one another. At the end of verse 10, for example, we read, nafshi uvitni. So there's a yod that's immediately followed by a vav. Although the scale here is quite small, the difference is noticeable. The vav definitely fills up more of the box than the yod, and comes down farther than the yod. This is one of the few places on the fragment where I could actually draw a line because the scribe wasn't writing on a slope or tilting his letters too differently from one another. Look at it in this color photo. Okay, and we've got another example at the end of the line. This one's a bit difficult to see, but I trust that you can still make it out. We've got two yods followed by a vav. Once again, I think the infrared photo is not as helpful. It's got just too much dark saturation. So let's switch once more over to the color photograph. There's no denying that the scribe has extended the vav farther down than the yods. So these last two examples, this one and this one, are once again nicely analogous to the situation in Psalm 22:17, where a vav is immediately followed by a yod. Clearly, when the letters are right next to each other, the scribe was very careful to distinguish them, and there's never a question as to which one is supposed to be the vav and which one the yod. All right, I won't spend any more time laboring the point. I think there is really no disputing that this scribe wrote his yods in ways that allowed the reader to distinguish them from vavs. So in this fragment, there's just no good reason to think that this letter is a yod rather than a vav. It's clearly a vav. Well, here's my own restoration of how this faded manuscript would have originally appeared, based on the writing style that the scribe exhibits in other fragments that aren't so faded. I've spent quite a bit of time sifting through the fragments, trying to find comparable letters for each letter in this line, or at least the part of the line that I've filled in. If you don't like my restoration, feel free to try coming up with one of your own. I doubt that you'll come up with anything that's terribly different from what I got. So hopefully this restoration can replace the lousy one that's been floating around on the internet. That one is terribly inaccurate and belongs to the dustbin of forgotten internet history. In a later video that deals with further objections to the Karu reading, I'll address the issue of what is or is not happening after the word yadai. Thanks for watching.